And welcome to the Newsmaker. I'm Brian O'Neill. Mayor John Buckley with us. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, good morning on this beautiful, sunny morning, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Mayor Buckley, starting out with something we had at the end of the news. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio wanting to defund the NYPD. I had a couple of questions there. Does de Blasio go to the Nikon meetings, the New York Conference on Mayors?
You know, in all the years that I've been going to NICOM meetings and conferences, I've never seen him. I've seen his name on some of the itinerary, but I've never actually seen him show up.
I don't know. Not having a police force. I mean, maybe you could do that in a really small place like the town of Lindley. Wow, New York City without a police force. I don't know what kind of substitute organization you could have in a place the size of New York City.
Yeah, I think that might be some sort of pipe dream on his part. There's a long history between de Blasio and the New York City Police Department of not getting along. I know the police department literally turned their backs on de Blasio at numerous occasions since he's been mayor. But I don't see how you could either defund or close down the New York City Police. Just to give you an idea, the New York City Police Department, just in raw numbers, is larger than many standing armies in the throughout the world. So it's a large police department. Obviously, New York City is a very large city, largest city in the United States, and could you imagine not having any police presence there at all? I think that's a recipe for disaster, and really kind of pie in the sky. Governor Cuomo immediately came out against it and pushed back on the idea, and nothing new there. The governor and the mayor of the city of New York, historically have not seen eye to eye. I don't think they really care for each other on a personal level, so I don't really expect too much to come of it.
Talking to Hornell Mayor John Buckley this morning. Protests all across the country. Locally, you and Chief Murray were at the protest, the BLM, the Black Lives Matter protest the other day here in Hornell, noon on Friday, I believe.
Yeah, there's actually a pair of peaceful protests here in the city this past week. The first one was at Veterans Memorial Park at James Street, and that was a very peaceful, more of a sit-in where a bunch of people got together and read books and on the different cultures and the minorities and my takeaway of both events was really that they were peaceful, and in a time where so much where the protests have really been hijacked in a lot of instances by vandals and by looters and people that wish to do harm. I think Hornell really kind of stood out and stood above the rest and really showed what we're made of. And and the idea to have a protest is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's in our First Amendment, and I support people to be able to peacefully assemble and protest and get their viewpoints across. But the problem is, and you've seen this play out across the country, is when you have these bad actors, these agitators descend on these protests and infiltrate the protests and then take it over, and then you have the vandalism and the looting and the violence and everything else, and then that really and when that happens, Brian, it really takes away the message from the protesters, because whatever message they're trying to convey, if you have all this violence and the stores are being looted and people are getting knocked down and hurt and shot, the conversation goes away from what the protest is about, and now the focus is on all of that. So, just a big thank you and kudos to everyone in Hornell who had organized the protests, who had participated in the protests. They were very civil. They were very polite and respectful. And as you mentioned, Chief Murray and I did go over and participate, and we walked down the street and listened to a lot of what they had to say. And Marcina Harmonson, who I can't say enough about, she really gave an eloquent speech, and and really, and from my standpoint, Brian, it was really educational because here she is. I think she's about 65 years old, and I got to hear some of the stories of her youth and as she was growing up, and some of the things that she's had to go through, and not only her but her children and now her grandchildren, and in this day and age, the things that she had to go through, and people of her generation, her children and grandchildren should not still have to live that and still fight that same fight today. I think we're too far along. We're better than that as a society, and here in Hornell, I think we are. I mean, are we perfect? No one's perfect. We can always do better. There's always more outreach, and there's always more understanding. But overall, I think we really kind of stood out and showed the community and everyone else. This is the way to do it. You do it peacefully, you do it respectfully, and have that civic engagement.
Speaking with Hornell Mayor John Buckley, after a lot of pressure, the governor seems to have changed a bit on graduations. He's going to allow them starting June 26th. A total of 150 people will be allowed at the graduations, and that's with social distancing going on. To your thoughts?
Yeah, Brian, I mean, this has been kind of a big issue, especially, in the school districts where you have all of these seniors in their last year of high school have been just so adversely affected by this. And, when you look back on your senior year, you can, kind of reflect back on a lot of different things. Well, these seniors this year have been stripped of many of these things, the senior ball or the senior prom and the senior trip and all of these different things. And now, they're facing no graduation. So, I'm glad the governor reversed course on this. I don't know how that will jive with some of the larger school districts and the larger high schools, in and around the state. But I'm hoping that our school district can pull something together and make it work, because those kids need to, they deserve that, right? You go through school, you get to that point, you deserve that graduation ceremony, with your teachers and your parents and everyone. So hopefully they can do that. I will make note though that in a time where COVID-19 and we have all the social distancing and all of that, you'll notice that there was no pushback on any of the large protests throughout New York State as far as social distancing goes. That seemed to, social distancing seemed to go out the window, and there didn't seem to be, much care or concern about that. But as far as having gatherings for a funeral or calling hours for a loved one, you couldn't do that. So I think there's a hypocrisy there. You can flood the stores. You can go to the Wegmans and the Walmarts and the Lowe's and all these retail, big chain retail centers, but you can't have calling hours. You can't have a traditional or a proper funeral for your loved ones. I think there's something wrong with that picture. So, I think it's about time the governor starts reversing some of these executive orders and starts to loosen some of the restrictions. And, now that we're, approaching the summer months, I think now's the time to do it.
Speaking with Hornell Mayor John Buckley this morning. When we get back from the break, we'll talk about the upcoming vote tomorrow. We'll talk about local construction projects on the 4th of July. Is it going to happen this year? We'll find out. Stay with us.
Courts Auto Collision.
Hi, Bill.
Never seen an insurance job we both can't make money on yet.
Bill?
And yes, I still have a free loaner car.
Bill, I just called to...
Courts Auto Collision, State Route 36, south of Canisteel, 698-9900. Online at McCourtsCollision.com.
Bill, for the first time in my life, you have left me speechless.
I am Bill McCourt.
Wow.
Your health is more important than ever. So at UR Medicine, we have new ways to stay healthy and safe. With telemedicine, access your medical team from home. And we've redesigned in-person visits to maximize your safety with symptom screenings, reconfigured waiting areas, rigorous disinfection, and masks for everyone. It's UR Medicine redesigned. The access you need, the safety you expect. Visit redesigned.urmc.edu.
Selecting a nursing home for a loved one isn't easy until you've discovered Hornell Gardens Nursing and Rehabilitation. Hornell Gardens delivers the highest level of care, compassion, and commitment with amenities and activities that will enrich body, mind, and spirit. It's a place that's close to home. Stop in for a tour of Hornell Gardens, located at 434 Monroe Avenue in Hornell, or to learn more, call 585-222-CARE or visit hurlbutcare.com.
Back with Hornell Mayor John Buckley. It's Monday, June the 8th. That makes tomorrow, Tuesday the 9th, which is school board, school budget voting day, Mayor Buckley.
Yeah, a little different this year, Brian. Instead of actually going to the high school to cast your vote, the absentee ballots were sent out to all the voters within the school district. So, different way of doing things this year in light of COVID-19. So it'll be interesting to see the participation level. I know the last couple of school votes, the numbers have been pretty low as far as voter turnout goes. So definitely be keeping an eye on that just to see what the participation rate is. Also on that ballot, as you're aware of, there is the library vote. They're asking for their tax levy increase as well. And as you know, we sent out a press release last week in support of that. Myself, the city chamberlain, Michelle Smith, and all 10 city aldermen, all 10 council members all support that as well. With the COVID-19 sales tax revenue declines that we're seeing, and honestly, not just sales tax, but revenues across the board are just in the tank this year because of all the shutdowns and the economy basically coming to a grinding halt. We're in support of that. Library is a very important institution here in the city. A lot of people use it. A lot of people rely on it. One interesting thing about the library is, if you look at who actually uses the library, about roughly 30%, maybe a little bit more, of the people that use it are actually not city residents, but from out of town. So that's to say, the village of North Hornell, town of Hornellsville, maybe Canasteel, and some of these outlying areas. So they do draw a lot of people from out of the city as well. So I think, and just talking to the library trustees, applying the tax to the school, the broader voter base of the school district as opposed to just the city alone, really kind of spreads that out, and I think is a more fair and equitable way to fund the library. So we're in support of it. They've been going through a lot of renovations in the library since that were planned last year. So the library will have a new look to it as well, and it's important to get their doors open when they're allowed to be open. That is, with the COVID-19 restrictions, and get them up and running. And I hope everyone supports it.
Mayor Buckley, the local construction projects, want to go over some of those, starting with the Canasteel Street Bridge. That closed a little bit early. What happened there?
Well, New York State does a bridge study every year, or not, I shouldn't say study, but rather an inspection. They inspect the bridges on an annual basis, and obviously, we've talked about the Canasteel Street Bridge, for quite some time. We have the funding in place to replace it, and that bridge will be replaced next year. I was hoping we could, still have it open until the time to close it prior to the replacement. Unfortunately, the state conducted their inspection. They red flagged it and forced our hand, so we had to close it off just because of the deterioration underneath of the bridge, of the superstructure itself. So obviously, safety is always first. But it's unfortunate. We were hoping we could kind of limp it along until next year. But it will be replaced, and that's been something that we've been looking at for a long time, going back to the prior administration. I remember when Sean Hogan was the mayor, and I'd come in his office and say, hey, what about the Canasteel Street Bridge? Or what do we do? I was always kind of hounding him about that when I was on the city city council, and but these things take time, right? Bridge projects, just to get the funding for them, takes years. Then you have to go into the the design and the engineering, and secure the funding and all that. It's a multi-step process, and it really takes years rather than months to do these things. But good news is next year we'll have a brand new bridge on Canasteel Street. We've got obviously the other two going right now on Seneca Street and over on East Main Street. So by the end of next year we'll have 3 new bridges.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment, quite an achievement, Mayor John Buckley. 4th of July, that's a big question mark these days. Is it going to happen, and if so, how?
Well, the 4th of July, the 4th of July is on the calendar, Brian, so the 4th will come. But you're obviously referring to the events down at James Street.
Right.
So this year, obviously, if you look around the region, events are being canceled. They're basically dropping like flies. Arkport's already canceled their Summerfest. Allegheny County Fair has already been canceled. So you have all these car shows around the region have been canceled this year as well. So the Board of Public Safety meets this week, and I'm going to make the recommendation, and it's hard to do, and it's hard to swallow, but in light of everything, and following the guidelines that's coming out of the state right now, and with the county, and I work with the county and Jack Wheeler, the county manager over there, on a daily and weekly basis, and I'm always listening to their guidance and thoughts on these things too. So it's a difficult decision, but I'm going to recommend to the board that we do not have the parade and not have the festivities at the park this year. I will say, however, that we do still plan on having the fireworks. So we will have the fireworks down at the park the night of the 4th of July, just to celebrate our country's independence. I think that's important, but just because of the social distancing, we don't want, obviously any, and we've talked about this, we don't want any spikes in COVID, and, not to say that there would be, but I think until we get a little clearer picture, we'll put that off at least for this year.
Talking with Hornell Mayor John Buckley on the COVID issue. On the COVID-19 issue, Phase 3, is that starting this week?
Well, no, not for us. We still have a little bit more time, and it really, some of these things you think that the dates are locked in, but they're really not. So they're kind of moving targets depending on different metrics, and you notice that once we were transitioning from Phase 1 to Phase 2. And all the all the confusion and resulting anger from that, because we were looking forward to entering Phase 2, and then all of a sudden we weren't. And the governor said one thing one day and then reversed course the next day. And obviously you saw the comments from myself and Jack Wheeler and Senator O'Mara, and right on down the line, a lot of frustration, a lot of consternation that shouldn't have been. So we'll obviously, that's something we monitor on a daily basis, and it changes on a daily basis. Even within the phases, what's allowed and what's not allowed changes. Just yesterday we were talking about earlier in the show, we were talking about high school graduation. So that just came out a day ago. So. You have to really pay attention. You have to really kind of stay dialed into what's coming out of Albany these days, because it changes so quickly. So we're doing our best to stay on top of these things, and even within some of these decisions, Brian, the devil's always in the detail. So sometimes you have to dig down further and start really peeling back the layers of the onion to find out what you can or how you can do something now that you can do it. Even with some of the businesses reopening, they have to have a documented plan in place. They have to adhere to certain guidelines. How many employees, how many customers can they service at one time, how much space between workstations and those sorts of things. So it's not as easy as just flipping the switch and saying, hey, we're back open for business like we used to be. No, it's not like that. The paradigm has shifted to a degree, and we're all just trying to do the best we can in light of all these difficulties that we're facing.
And phase 3, if I'm correct, Mayor Buckley, that's dining in a restaurant?
Yep, that'll include dining in, and there's a bunch of other things. I don't have the list sitting in front of me, but we're looking forward to just transitioning into phase 3, and and I think honestly, Brian, the ultimate goal is just to get back to some sense of normalcy, and we're getting there. We're step by step. I think with a lot of the civil unrest that's been going on, we're still dealing with it, right? There's still positive cases that pop up here and there. Hasn't gone away. I'm really curious to see what it looks like going into flu season in the fall. So what's the state? How's the governor going to handle that? If and when cases start increasing again, and there's a lot of questions, a lot of what ifs out there.
And a final question for you, Mayor Buckley, and we're down to the last couple of minutes before we switch over to Leslie Danks-Burke. How much was Alstom affected in Hornell? I know some industries and factories were, but how much was Alstom affected in Hornell? I had the impression not a lot.
No, they absolutely were affected.
I should say in terms of layoffs and things like that.
Well, they did have workforce reductions, and they had to adhere to social distancing, so that it really did put a crimp on what they were doing. And they are ramping up and bringing employees back, but they didn't get through this totally unscathed. It did have an impact on them. Obviously, not to the degree like Corning Incorporated up the road.
Okay.
They've had they're looking at a lot of layoffs, and I think you've reported on that
right.
the past several weeks. So, but Alstom, they're coming back. They're bringing people back. They're getting things back online. But COVID, it's not just the local businesses, but it's the supply lines as well. So there's always that impact down the road, and how does that affect your business? So it's multifaceted.
Mayor John Buckley, out of time, and thanks for correcting me on that Alstom issue. I guess that was it. You see the numbers coming out of Corning Incorporated, and I came to the erroneous conclusion that Alstom pretty much was not affected at all. You corrected me. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for having me on, Brian. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you very much. Leslie Danks-Burke coming up next here on Newsmaker.